and love is lived out in our world. And I got to tell you, church, when I watch the news, or I look around at what's happening in our world today, not only in our world, but I mean right here in our neighborhoods, love is void. Love doesn't seem to have any attachments to what we do day in and day out. You know, but right before service, we were playing King and Country. And in the song Proof of Life, it says, let your life be a proof of his love. Let your life be the proof of God's love. Let our life be the proof. And so I wanted to spend some time in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And over the past several weeks, we've talked about the value of love in verses 1 through 3 of chapter 13, which that is the kind of love that adds meaning to another person's life. I also spoke in verses 4 through 8, the virtues of love. Love that benefits others. Love that will benefit you, and if it benefits you, it'll benefit another if we share it, if we share God's love. A love that provides victory over our broken, flawed, and failed relationships, over the broken and flawed and failed relationships at our jobs, in our schools, in our neighborhoods, and with other people. Love has been broken. Love has been misplaced. Love has been misused. And thus Paul had a lot to say about that. Paul taught us and is teaching us in chapter 13 how to respond to our world. And when Paul penned 1 Corinthians chapter 13, he did so because of the corruption that existed within the church. The corruption, now listen to me, please don't be offended by what I'm saying, but it starts here. It starts with us, church. It starts with the believers in Christ Jesus. And so Paul was addressing the corruption within the church because the people in the church were abusing their spiritual gifts, and the way they were abusing them is by using their gifts and sharing their gifts void of love. It just became a process. It just became a way and means of a Christian life. But it had no meaning. It had no true meaning. It had no real benefit to others. And in spite of the spiritual gifts that God has given us, in spite of the spiritual gifts that God had given them, they were being abused because they were not being exercised in the spirit of love. As a matter of fact, in 1 Corinthians 13, I found this interesting. 1 Corinthians 13 actually was the first chapter he wrote to the church of Corinth. But as he finished it, he started to realize that there was things that he needed to say, things that needed to be told, things that needed to be taught before he got this and before he got to this point. I've always told you, and if you've ever been in any of my Bible studies, he just has this incredible way of punching you right in the eyeball and you not realizing it till hours later. And you get home, you're celebrating. Oh, that was such a powerful message, Paul. Thank you. Say, wait a minute. I think he was talking about me. I think he was talking about what I'm not doing. But it never seemed to happen at that time. So Paul writes 1 Corinthians 13 to kind of set the record straight by teaching us how not to abuse the spiritual gifts. As a matter of fact, the verse prior to chapter 13, in chapter 12, verse 31, it says, let me now show you the most excellent way to love. Because you failed. Because you're missing the mark. I know and I believe that you're passionate about sharing Jesus with others. But we have to do it in a spirit of love. We have to be in a spirit of love before we can exercise these gifts and then be effective. That's what he's provided. That's what he asks of us. See, God's love is to be exercised, expressed, and deployed in the lives of others. And the word there is charity. The word is charity. When you talk about love, you're talking about charity. And so we know that charity benefits others. We know that our charity has meaning to others. And we know that through our charity, people can find victory in their relationships. And then finish it all off with one verse. Chapter 13, verse 13. One that we all know really well. These three things remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Faithful hope is what he's calling us to. That's what he's calling us to use when we exercise our gifts. The kind of faith that brings hope to others. And that kind of faith that brings hope to others provides them the love, the character of God himself. See, in this one verse, we finish up our series. But this is, I would cite for you, the most important verse within this. Because of the rest of it, the rest of the 12 chapters kinds of gives us instructions what to do, what not to do, how to do it, when to do it, and all those things. But then he undergirds it here. This is where the foundation is poured. Faith, hope will equal love. It describes the very character of God himself and reveals to us individually as well as corporately, and will reveal to the world Jesus Christ and his grace and his unmerited, undeserved favor in our lives. You know, I tell you that love is missing in our world. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist or an Einstein to figure that out. But something else is missing. Something that ushers in this love. And that is the unmerited favor of believers. Grace. And grace is missing in our world today. If I had to cite one thing that's missing even in the church world today, it's grace. It's that unmerited favor. We don't get to choose. We do not. Yes, we can choose. And yes, we can do. And we're called to choose. We're called to do. That's what faith and hope is all about. But we don't always get to choose who crosses our path. We don't always get to choose who we encounter. And sometimes he chooses for us. And he calls us to do. And we end up doing nothing because of the lack of grace that we have. See, we begin by looking at faith and hope and understanding how faith and hope apply to our spiritual gifts. So we begin in Hebrews 11:1, which tells us faith is being sure of what we hope for. Faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not yet see. If God crosses your path with an individual, someone that you may know, someone that you may not know, someone that you like, someone you may not like, there's a reason. There's a reason he's crossed your path with them. And listen to me, please hear this. That reason is for you to solve and for you to perform. That's why he's placed it in your path. He didn't place it in your path so you can say, man, I need to call Pastor Eli and find out what to do. Or Pastor Dave, or Pastor Josh, or Pastor Eva. I got to find out what I need to do. No, everything you need to do, you have. Church, everything you need, you have. That's why he brought them across your path. How we respond to them makes all the difference in the world. Think about it. I mean, seriously, think about this. When one day when all things are done and over, we won't need faith. We won't need to have hope anymore. We will be with the faithful one. We will be with the one who provided us hope to be in a place of eternal love. A love that does not fail. It doesn't fail here on the earth, and it certainly ain't going to fail when we get to heaven one day. So faith and hope is important for us today because it leads us to love. It guides us into the presence of God who is pure love. So think about that. One day it will be, period, a state of love for all of eternity. The question is, how does faith and hope operate in the here and now? How does this faith and hope that Paul talks about in verse 13, how does it function in our world today? Well, first, faith is given by God. Please understand that. The faith that you have was given to you as a tool from God to do. To do. Don't take my word for it. Listen to what he says in Ephesians chapter 2 verse 8. For you have been saved through faith. This is not, nor can it be from oneself. This is a gift of God. Faith that saves. Faith that saves not only us, but when we act in faith, when we do in faith, it provides salvation for others as well. See, faith provides us the courage. When you know in your knower that you know that God is with you, then it makes it a whole lot easier to do, to go in faith and to do. And it gives you this inner sense of courage, where you're not afraid to face whoever you're with or whatever he's brought across your path. I would say this kind of faith that Paul's talking about here, this is a fearless kind of faith. This is the kind of faith that allows us to engage others, to stand with them when we feel like running, to stand with them when we want rather turn our backs on it. He gives us that courage through this faith to do and to believe with them. Have you ever believed with someone who has a hard time believing? I just don't know if I can believe that or I can trust that. Well, let me explain to you how God operated in my life. Let me testify to what God did in my life by faith. And this faith that allowed me to do and allowed me to accept is the same faith that you have. Provided by God. You just need to tap into it. And we can do that. We can tap into it through prayer, through his word. That's why he tells us to be doers of the word, because it is faithfulness. It is words that provide faith, strength, and courage for our faith. I call that valor. I call that courage to love others. And that's what's lacking, the courage to love others. We have separated. Our whole world is being separated. It's being separated. We're drawing battle lines against each other. We're standing against each other. And when we stand against each other, as I've said many times, and as the word says, it'll fall. We will fall. We will fail. So we need to stand together in faith. This question always comes to my mind. If not you, then who? And if not now, then when will you become doers of God's word by faith in Christ Jesus? In Matthew 18, it tells us this. I tell you, where two of you are, I want you to listen to this, because this is really important. I think this is one of the most important things I'm going to say about faith here this morning. It's something that I've discovered over the years. We know the passage in Matthew 18:19, where Jesus said, I tell you, where two of you on earth agree upon anything you ask for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. Now, I want you to notice something. I want you to notice it doesn't say where two believers are gathered together. It doesn't say where two disciples are gathered together. It doesn't say where two devotees are gathered together. It merely says where two are gathered together. Someone that's willing to stand with you. Someone, even if they may never prayed the prayer themselves. But there's something powerful in twos. We've seen that in the Old Testament, and we see that in the New Testament. We have to stand with others, and we are to invite others to stand with us. And this kind of faith will provide hope in the person that you're encountering and hope in the person that's participating with you, where two are gathered together and agree upon anything. And this faith to do, it provides not only them hope, but it provides the people around them hope, and it allows us to choose fearlessly. See, when we chose Jesus, when we accepted him, when we came to believe in him, he began to direct our paths. My path was going this way. After I accepted Jesus, it started going this way. And the cross was then in the crossroads of my life. I think about what it was like before Jesus. The cross was always there. I found myself in the shadow of the cross so many different ways. But once I chose to accept Jesus by faith, then this hope arose in my life. And if I keep my eyes fixed upon the cross, then he will direct my paths. These are the paths that he talked about. These are the paths that Jeremiah talked about. When Jeremiah says, God knows the plans he has made for your life, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. That's what he did for us. But he didn't do it until my eyes were on him. And please hear me. Even when you're facing this way, you're still in the shadow of the cross. It covers over the whole world. And we, church, please hear this. When we choose to follow Jesus, we choose to go, we choose to do it his way. Please hear that today. Like I said, if you miss everything else, don't miss this. We are called to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, with all of our mind, with all of our soul. And the second commandment is just as strong, is just as powerful. Love your neighbor as yourself. And this word neighbor that is translated in the Bible all the way back to the Aramaic and in the Hebrew and in the Greek, it all has the same meaning. Anyone who crosses your path is your neighbor. Not just the people who live beside you, or across the street, or in your neighborhood. But it's everybody that you would come in contact with, everybody that would cross your path. They are your neighbors. So let me read it again. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. In verse 39 of chapter 22 of Matthew says, the second is just like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love that person that you come in contact with. Love that person that crosses your path. And I know sometimes it's not the people we chose. It's not the people that we would choose. But if we choose Jesus, if we accept and by faith have hope that he is going to direct us and guide our paths, then we have to believe that they and you have a call from Jesus. See, by choosing Jesus, I don't choose my neighbor. I don't choose my neighbors. By choosing Jesus, I don't choose who I encounter along this journey I call life. Because realistically, Psalmist tells us that every step was ordained for us before we even came into being. God created you. Please hear this. He created you. He called you for a certain task. For something that you can do, I can't do. Something you can do, Eli can't do. Something you can do that Josh nor Eva can do. He has imparted that into you. And if you choose him by faith, he will provide not only you hope in what is to come, but another person the same kind of hope that you have in Jesus. Choose hope. Choose to go. And by faith, do. And that's all Paul was trying to say. These three things remain because they are eternal. Faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. And what Paul was doing, he was connecting. He was connecting faith and hope together. Faith is a gift of God to go and do where Jesus leads us to go and do. Hope is the provision to provide us the courage to go and do. And then when we put faith and hope together, the results are love. God's love. When we act in faith, when we provide hope, we are demonstrating the very character of God himself to our world, to our little corners of the world. Faith and hope equals God's love. But Lord, we need the courage to act in faith, to go and do in faith, to provide hope. I love what John wrote in 4:12. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God is alive in us, and his love is made complete, and his love is seen by others. As our praise and worship team makes their way back up to the platform, I guess what Paul was saying, and I'm saying today, not because it's just words, but because I believe it. I believe it with all my heart, mind, soul, and I exercise it with strength. I believe God is enough, church. He is enough for everything. When I pulled that Bible out of the toolbox, the children's toolbox, I said to the kids, this here is a tool for every situation under heaven. Every situation you face, every situation that comes across your path, everyone you encounter, everyone you go to. This faith, this hope is more than enough to learn how to love others, how to courageously love others, and how to go fearlessly into our world. When faith and hope work together, church, love is its results. So let your life be a proof of his love. As we stand to our feet, we're going to use this as our prayer. The song is more than enough.